Hey, my name is Qemo, and today I'll be talking about how you use loops to work with and modify arrays. So let's say we have an array of integers, we'll call it int array, and let's say it has 5 elements. We can make these 5 elements 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So that means that if there's 5 elements, that means you have indices 0 through 4. So this is index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4. Index 5 is out of bounds of the array, because that's just how arrays work, where the numbering starts at 0 instead of 1. So if you want to print all the elements of this array, your first guess might be to do cout array, just that. But unfortunately, this will not work. It will result in a compiler. So what you actually have to do is you need a for loop in this case. And you could use a while loop, but a for loop is better in this instance because you have a specific number of executions that you want. So you would do for, and the convention is just to use the I, an integer named I, to run the for loop. So you would do int I equals 0, since the index numbering starts at 0. I is less than the number of elements in the array. Here we have 5. That's typical. So you want to start at the first indice, and then you want I to be less than the size of the array. And this is our initialization for the loop. This is our test. This is our update. So you want to increment I with each execution of the loop. And then so here you would just do cout, and then that specific element of the array, which would just be I in this case. So it'll go 0 will be printed, 1 will be printed, 2 will be printed, 3 will be printed, 4 will be printed. All those indices will be printed, and that will result, let me close this, in an output. So this would be our output right down here. You'll get 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, all combined. There's no spacing or anything, in what looks like one giant number. So that's how you would print out each individual element of the array using a for loop. But you could include a lot of other things here in the body of the loop, and you'll see that with the next example. So let's say you wanted to do something a little more complicated, maybe with like 2D arrays. You could do int, that's defines the data type of the array, int array, let's say 2 rows, 5 columns. And then this array could contain the elements, let's say 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then that's the first row. And then 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. That's the second row. So let's say that's our next array we're going to be working with. In this case, you'll want a nested loop, which just means kind of like a loop within a loop. And the examples you'll see are more so one nested loop, but you could have 2 nested loops, 3 nested loops, 4, depending on what you're really trying to do. In this case, all we need is just a single nested loop. So you would do for, similar to before, where you have int I is equal to 0, I is less than, but in this case, you'll want to do the number of rows, because usually will follow array ij. You could do array ji and keep I in this order, but it's better to practice doing this one way over and over rather than to kind of like experiment with different methods, because they all do the same thing in the end. So here I prefer to do for int I equals 0, I is less than, or sorry, not greater than, less than 2, whatever number of elements you have, and then same update. So then within the body of that loop, you'll have another loop. For int j is equal to what? 0. And similar to before, I is just the convention you'll learn, and j is also the convention you learn for the inner loop within a nested loop. So int j is equal to 0. J is now less than the number of columns, so 5, and then j is incremented. So here, you'll want kind of like a similar thing. You would just do cout and then array ij if you wanted to print out each element of the array. Let's say here we wanted to do something else. So maybe array ij, so whatever value is held at the location of whatever row I in column J will be incremented. And then we close our loop. Those are closing brackets, trust me. And then, so what this will do is it'll take each one of these values, it'll increment through. So the first one will be 0, 0, which would just be this top left corner, and that will be incremented to 11. Then it'll go through, it won't change the value I will still stay 0, but now J will have been updated to 1, so it'll do array 0, 1. That means your first row, 0 represents the first row, 1 represents the second row. Your first row, and then the value of J will represent the second value within the column, index number 1. That will also be incremented. So this will turn to 11, and that will turn to 12, and that will turn to 13, that will turn to 14. And then by the time this is turned to 15, you've reached the end, and then you'll reach the end, and this J will no longer be less than 5. So you'll leave this inner loop and come back to this outer loop, update I to the value of 1, and execute the same exact thing for the bottom row. By that time, I will be equal to 2 once you've incremented it, and then you will no longer execute this loop, leave it, and all your values will be updated to be 1 greater than their original. And one last note is that arrays work with pass by reference, so you don't need to do anything extra here, because your array value, or if this were a function or something, your array values would be automatically updated with each step of the loop. You don't need any kind of to do pass by reference explicitly, because it's implicit to an array. All right, that's it for now. Thank you. I'm Qemo, and this is my application for being a tutor for EECS 183.